Today we're fly fishing near Lake Placid in upstate New York. Wilmington is a small town nestled alongside the beautiful west branch of the Ausable River. This area is a fly fisher's dream. The river is renowned for its beauty, fishing, and abundant hatches of caddis, mayflies, and stonefly hatches. There are over 35 miles of clean, mineral-rich waters to angle in, with 5 miles dedicated to strict catch-and-release fishing. With miles of pocket water, riffles, deep pools, and long channels, the West Branch provides great opportunities for anglers if they have the skills to properly locate fish in this vast river. When I first began fly fishing, I struggled to find good books that spelled out the fundamentals in language that was easy to understand. Then I discovered Prospecting for Trout, written by Tom Rosenbauer. Finally, a book that made total sense to a novice, yet still had lots of solid advice for veterans. For several years, I've wanted Tom to appear on the show to talk about prospecting for trout, as I know people would really enjoy learning from it and him. This year, Tom is relaunching this very successful book with updated information, diagrams, and photos. Here was finally my chance to get him to appear on the show. Tom is one of those special people any one of us would love to fish with.
I'm going to switch to a dry. I'm a little bit tired.
Tom took a few minutes to talk about why he created the book and how it helps teach people the basics of fly fishing for trout and other species.
I wrote Prospecting for Trout because I felt there was a need for a book that balanced fishing with the natural world, with what a trout does in its world, with what insects do, with what the geology does to a river valley, and how you can look at a river from very far away, how you can step back and see how to fish the river, learn how to fish the river just by looking at the banks and the rocks and the geology without ever having to turn over rocks or study entomology. The objectives of Prospecting for Trout were originally to introduce people to a trout's world, what a trout needs. That was the most important thing. If you understand what a trout needs to survive and pass its genes on to the next generation, then you learn an awful lot about fishing. So what does a trout need in a stream? What velocity does it need? How close does it need to be to food? Do they move around a lot or don't they move around a lot? And what affects their movement in a stream, or lack of movement for that matter? So I really wrote the book for someone who doesn't understand a trout stream, who looks at this river and just sees a bunch of flowing water and says, oh my God, that's way too fast for a fish to live in, and doesn't get down to the little niches and see how there's spots below the rocks, in front of the rocks, and the side of the rocks, the way the current forms little eddies where fish can rest comfortably and still feed. I guess my philosophy is trout are an awful lot more interesting than bugs, but people study the behavior and life cycle of bugs more than they do of trout, and trout are infinitely more interesting than bugs, I think. So to take that same level of scientific discussion that people use for entomology and bring that into the trout's world and how a trout lives and what they do all year long and how they feed, I think just adds a lot of interest for most people. In pocket water like this, where you've got lots and lots of rocks and lots of good places for trout to live, you really have to narrow it down and fish the best places, because if you tried to fish every rock, you'd go nuts. There's just too many rocks. So you look for the best intersection of currents that you can find. Now we've got a really nice situation right here where we've got a rock, and then we've got the plume below the rock. This is pretty dead, swirly water in here, and fairly slow water. And then down to the base of this jumble of rocks. So what you've got here is you've got a cushion that builds up in front of these rocks so that the water slows there because of the friction. Then you've got the water that washes down both sides of this rock. And you notice, if you watch the foam that goes down there. You'll see that the foam lines, which is where the food is also going to be carried, goes along either side of the rock. There isn't much foam behind the rock where a lot of people might think there'd be a trout. So there isn't much food here. The other nasty thing for a trout behind a rock like this is that the water is swirling. It's unpredictable. The water, you look at it, the water is going in all kinds of directions, and trout can't predict where that food is going to drift down. They get knocked around and they go for a mayfly, and then it gets thrown another direction they didn't expect it to go. So they like things predictable. But if you look down the sides, you can see that it's a nice predictable progression. And where these two plumes that go down either side of the rock join, I like to call the focal point, which is where all the food below the rock comes together. And in this instance, not only do you have a nice focal point here, but you also have a jumble of rocks, so there's a little protection there, both from the current and a little bit of slowing of the current. So my vote for where to find a trout in this whole area wouldn't be behind the rock, probably wouldn't be along the sides because there isn't much break from the current, but would be right in this area where all the current comes together. Yeah, I started prospecting for trout with a chapter on rich streams versus poor streams, one of the first chapters, because you can tell a lot about a river from standing way back. We're here on the west branch of the Ausable in New York State, and you can tell a lot about where the fish are going to be, what they're going to eat, just by stepping back and looking at the place. You'll see a lot of round boulders. They're mostly granite, so you're not getting a lot of nutrients from the rocks. The geology determines the character of a river, and these rocks are mostly granite, as opposed to something like limestone or marble where you get some nutrients coming into the river. So also look at the color of the water. The color of this water is always kind of tea-colored, and tea-colored water typically means water that's not as fertile as water that's crystal clear. Water also with a light milky tinge is generally limestone water, and that indicates a very, very rich ecosystem. But here we've got tea-colored water, and if you look at the rocks are kind of contrary to what you might think looking at the geology and looking at the color of the water, because the rocks have a fair amount of algae and diatoms and slippery stuff on them. So you've got some of the characteristics here of an infertile river, but you've also got indications that it's relatively fertile. So you've got kind of a balance between the two, and I would expect you could say this river is kind of in between a spring creek or a limestone stream and a very infertile mountain stream, somewhere in between. You could expect most of the bugs in the river to be fairly large. If you turn over a rock and take a look at it, and you find these big flat stoneflies and mayflies, but you can actually tell that without even having to turn over a rock. Just looking at the geology of the river, you see a lot of these big flat and round rocks, good-sized rocks. You know you're going to find stoneflies and caddisflies without even having to turn over a rock. If this were a river with really fine gravel and a lot of silt, most of the mayflies you find would be smaller, and they'd be skinnier. They'd be more of the swimming type of mayfly than the flat crawlers that you find in here. So without even turning over a rock, you can have a pretty good idea of what nymph to fish just by looking at the geology of the river. You know, a lot of people get overwhelmed with larger rivers this size and bigger, particularly people who are used to fishing on small streams. And it's really a matter of just looking at a pool very critically and seeing where the food's going to go and picking out the spots where you think the trout are going to be and where they're going to be feeding. So we've got this fairly good sized pool here. There's lots of water and lots of rocks, but we've got that soft spot over there behind the rock with some decent current and some good depth in there for protection. So if I were fishing this pool and there's nothing rising, I would probably go right to that spot rather than trying to fish the whole pool, particularly if I had a great big river and lots of places to go. So I'm going to chuck this nymph over in that deep water by the soft spot and see if there's a trout there. But you just need to break a bigger river down into manageable bites, and when you do that and look for the best water, they become quite easy to handle. I'm just going to throw this nymph over in that soft spot, try to keep it in the same current as the bubbles. Let it just dead drift down through that nice deep slot. How many times should you go through a run with nymphs or with a dry like this? Everybody wonders how long they should stick with it. Well, there's certainly no tried and true answer, but typically with any fly, when you're prospecting, your first cast is going to be your best one because you're going to catch that fish that's aggressively feeding and is ready to grab the next morsel. Every cast after that becomes a lot less productive. Oh, there's a trout. He took the I've got two nymphs on here, and he took the bottom fly. The top fly is a, oh my God, it's a wild brook trout. The top fly is a tungsten beadhead fly that gives this some weight, and the bottom fly is more an imitation of some of the dark stone flies. But that looks to me like a wild brook trout. Beautiful colors, gorgeous. Female brook trout. Pocket water and lots of bugs and no fish rising, but they may be rising in that foamy water and we can't see them, or they may just not be rising, but I'm gonna try it dry anyways because they gotta come up eventually, and there are some nice meaty bugs on the water. So got a nice pair of midstream rocks there with a good plume behind them. What I'll do is I'll fish this side, the near side first, throw that big dry out there and fish the edges where all the bugs go and the current line is nice and steady. So I'm fishing this near seam here first. Getting a lot of drag, so I'm gonna do a little skating just because I really can't help it. So it looks like nobody's playing here in the near seam. Nobody's interested there. So I'll move over a little bit and try to get a cast in front of that rock over there. Right in the cushion in front of it. No. Try another one. Just drop that fly upstream with a little check cast so I get some slack in the line. Just saw a natural mayfly hop right in front of that rock and nothing ate that either, so I don't feel so bad. And try one a little bit to the other side of the rock. Maybe they're on the other side. So we had half a dozen nice dead drifts in front of that rock, and oh yeah, there we go. Now that fish took the fly as it started to drag. It's a nice fish too. Best way to get a fish in fast water like this is you just back up and lead it into the shallows, get them out of the current. and then lead them into a place like this behind this rock. Come on, buddy. And then just lead them right over the net and scoop them up. Nice little brown trout, hooked in the corner of the jaw, where we like to see it. Flies out, and we'll just put him right here in this relatively calm water and hold him until he takes off on his own. Move over into a little bit calmer water here, behind the rock. There he goes. He was where we said he was going to be. Or here you've got a classic pool with a riffle at the head. There's a big flat up above, and most of the current from that pool comes over into this side. You can see the foam line going all the way down through here. It's very deep over there. Most of the water behind me is really too shallow for trout, and you don't see much foam there, so you know there's not much food drifting back there. Here, you've got most of the current, so all the food that's being produced in the riffles up above us are coming down along this side, and you've got a nice drop off here. You've got the gravel drops off fairly sharp into some deeper water. What I like to do, and I'm looking for water that's deep enough, is with your polarized glasses, if you can't see things distinctly on the bottom, typically that's enough water for trout. So you can see here where you see the gravel and you can see all the stones, and then all of a sudden it starts to get kind of murky and fuzzy. That's where the fish are going to be.
You can use a variety of rods and reels to fish the Ausable. From 4 weights to 6, they're all adequate for the conditions and fish in the system. However, a 5-weight rod in a 9-foot length coupled with a large arbor reel is ideal. You can cast a dry fly, nymph, or even use a streamer. This rod can do it all.
You got a tough job. Not easy as so. I'm going to go ahead and start with the near current tongue. Nice short cast. In pocket water, you don't want to make a long cast because you end up getting dragged so quickly. Very tough to see your fly. You have to concentrate. Use a big enough fly or one with white wings so that you can pick it out. Surprised that there wasn't a fish in there, but nice little brown trout. This fish was right in front of those 2 rocks, right in the cushion in front of him, where we might expect him to be, and all I had to do was make a short cast and pop it over that rock and use the rock to help me avoid drag, and there he was. And we'll just release him here in this nice quiet water, and away he goes. Get right in tight to these rocks here. Hoping that somebody's sitting in front of the rock. Oh, that one jumped right out of the water to take it. Good idea to hold these fish upside down if you do have to pick them up. Best way to release them if they aren't hooked badly is just to reach down, twist the fly, and let them go. But in this pocket water, I don't want to just let a fish flip away because it's moving so fast. So I turn them upside down, they typically stop struggling, take the fly out easily, and then just let them go gently. For videos like the one you just saw and more, subscribe to our channel. You don't want to miss our weekly uploads of educational videos, exciting trips, and much more.